Tiny Desk Sermon, where the sermon is tiny, not the desk. So we are going to look at the readings for this coming Sunday, which is All Saints Sunday. As you probably know, November 1st is All Saints Day, so we typically observe the Sunday after Reformation as All Saints Sunday. Today is November 2nd, it's All Souls Day, and in the way we observe these holidays, we pretty much combine them all together. So there's some interesting things going on in the readings. I'm going to have a look at Daniel and Luke and see how they speak together to the theme that I am pondering right now. So let's look at Daniel quickly. The introduction here is helpful for understanding the book of Daniel. There are distinct parts to it. Parts of Daniel are the stories that we're very familiar with: Daniel in the lion's den, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But the other part of the book are the sort of apocalyptic visions. And this is from that section. And it comes from sometime in the 2nd century BCE, when the Jewish people are being heavily persecuted by the Greek powers, or this says Syrian powers too. And so it's a response, as apocalyptic literature typically is, as a response to very difficult, trying times of persecution and struggle. In the first year of King Belshazzar of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head as he lay in bed. Then he wrote down the dream. I, Daniel, saw in my vision by night the 4 winds of heaven stirring up the great sea, and 4 great beasts came up out of the sea, different from one another. As for me, Daniel, my spirit was troubled within me, and the visions of my head terrified me. I approached one of the attendants to ask him the truth concerning all this, so he said that he would disclose to me the interpretation of the matter. As for these 4 great beasts, 4 kings shall arise out of the earth, but the holy ones of the Most High shall receive the kingdom, and possess the kingdom forever, forever and ever. All right, so you probably get a sense of the sort of apocalyptic feeling of this. If you've ever read parts of Revelation, you hear some similarities here. Again, this type of reading is always a response to current political persecutions going on against people of faith. Even though the book is sort of set in Babylon, it's really a response to the current crisis, which is having to do with, like it says, either Syrian or Greek persecutions. And then what the apocalyptic literature does is project into the future and say, yes, there's going to be a lot of strife, but in the end, God wins. We win. So that's what you get at the end. But the holy ones of the Most High shall receive the kingdom. So 4 beasts, which are 4 kings, will arise, but the kingdom belongs to the holy ones of the Most High, and that will be eternal. So it's a very strong promise about the future being heard in the present, which is not seeing any of that come true yet in very difficult times. So keep that in mind as we look at Luke. You may be familiar with it's called the Beatitudes in Matthew. Blessed are those who are poor, blessed are the meek. Luke's version of that is similar, but it also has what's called the woes. He counterbalances the blessings with the woes, so it's a harder message to hear. But in the end, let's see how this might speak to us on All Saints' Day. Then Jesus looked up at his disciples and said, Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed are you who are hungry now, for you will be filled. Blessed are you who weep now, for you will laugh. Blessed are you when people hate you and when they exclude you, revile you, and defame you on account of the Son of Man. Rejoice in that day and leap for joy, for surely your reward is great in heaven. For that is what their ancestors did to the prophets. But woe to you who are rich, for you have received your consolation. Woe to you who are full now, for you will be hungry. Woe to you who are laughing now, for you will mourn and weep. Woe to you when all speak well of you, for that is what their ancestors did to the false prophets. But I say to you that listen, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who abuse you. If anyone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also, and from anyone who takes away your coat, do not withhold even your shirt. Give to everyone who begs from you, and if anyone takes away your goods, do not ask for them again. Do to others as you would have them do to you. All right, blessings and woes. Usually the blessings from Matthew are heard on All Saints because it reminds us of those who have lived blessed lives according to God's standards. And then the woes come in and complicate that in Luke. As I read this, I think about, up here it says, blessed are you who are hungry now, for you will be filled. And then it says, blessed, woe to you who are full now, for you will be hungry. But then as the full become hungry, now they become part of the blessed, and they will be filled. So it's an interesting cycle going on here. However you interpret these, they speak about some future, like Daniel, a future of blessing for those who do not know blessing now. And that is a God-given gift. And then at the last part, I say to you, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, and so forth. There's some difficult things in there to interpret in more detail, but in the context of All Saints Sunday, they strike me as a list of potential characteristics of the people that we remember as the saints that inspire us from history. People who love their enemies, who did good to those who hate them, who so forth. So think of all the names of people we remember, and you might stop and think, well, why do we remember this particular person? What is it about their life that is inspiring, that was faithful, that reveals the love of Christ to us and the way they lived? And that's why we recall them on All Saints' days. Now, we have a good theological underpinning of all this in the Lutheran tradition, especially that saints are not people who sort of earned their status as a saint, but to be a saint, to be a holy one of God, is to be a baptized person living out of faith in God's grace. And the rest then becomes the details of that life. So it's not that sainthood is something earned by checking off enough requirements, but the people who do live such faithful, inspiring lives are worth remembering and giving thanks for and learning from. And that's one of the great things about All Saints. So what I am thinking about that's going on in these readings is to think... hi, Barbara. Glad you're enjoying lunch. To think about how on All Saints, we kind of begin with remembering the people from the past who have lived faithful lives, who have inspired us either through history or through personal connection, whose love is with us in meaningful ways. So we focus on the past. And then in the Daniel reading and somewhat in the Luke reading, we hear about this promised future, the gift of what God is going to do to create this promised kingdom for the saints to live in, or for all people to live in, but we're talking about saints. So we have an emphasis on the past, we have an emphasis on the future, but we gather in the present. And it seems to me that what's inspiring about all this, not only for All Saints Sunday, but the whole understanding of our faith is how the past and the future impinge on the present moment. We are inspired by those who lived in the past and challenged by their witness. We are given hope and energy to live for this promised future that God is providing, one where everyone is fed and everyone is included, and joy is shared by all. We're living toward that. Both of these impinge on our present moment, which is to say, we are always, I think, striving to live faithful lives now, inspired by the witness of the past and living toward the promise of the future. And to me, that's a very helpful way to think about not just All Saints, but where we always are in life as people of faith. We are always living out of a past, living into a future, and the present moment is where those two come together and impact our lives. And so to be inspired to live out of loving enemies and doing good to those who hate you and all those things, those Jesus things that we are challenged by, is not something that we're doing out of the blue. It's something we're doing because we've seen other people strive to do it and see how difficult it was and how beneficial it was, how inspiring it was. And we know that the future that we're doing that we're living toward is not simply a product of us doing everything perfectly right. It is a God-given gift. And so the present moment is so enriched by looking to the past and looking to the future, and that changes how we are able to live as people of faith in any given moment or day. So I think the present moment is always when we are called to a pretty difficult task of discerning how we live out of the past and live toward the future. And let's not pretend or assume that the way saints of the past lived was any less challenging, was any less unclear. They struggled greatly. They didn't know we were going to remember them on this day. They were just living their lives of faith in the moment, inspired by their past and inspired by the promised future of God as well. They failed at it. They succeeded at it. They doubted. They had faith. So we are in that moment, and they were in that moment too. So I think to me that's a very helpful framework for thinking about how we live our lives of faith. And when we look to the great examples of the past, as we know with anybody, the greatness we remember about them is important. It's not the whole story. They struggled. They weren't perfect at it. Neither are we. And all that's okay. I'm seeing some more comments. The kingdom of God is at hand. Is that also the kingdom of heaven? Barbara, the kingdom of heaven is a phrase that mostly appears in Matthew. And it's Matthew's substitution for the kingdom of God. It's the same phrase, same meaning. It seems to be Matthew's probably pious way of avoiding using the word God a lot. So it gets turned into kingdom of heaven. But it's not a phrase that means when you die and go to heaven, that where God is. No, it's about the impact of God's reign in our earthly existence and into the future. I never thought about how if the fed will be hungry and the hungry will be blessed, is that suggesting universal salvation? Well, that's a big question. It could. I think it suggests. I've always tried to wrestle with this fairly. When Luke has this great reversal, this idea that the poor and the lowly and the rejected, the oppressed, are down here, and the rich and the powerful and the wealthy and the blessed are up here. Luke's vision of the gospel is the great reversal. But once you do that great reversal, What about the people that are now at the bottom? Are we saying that's a one-time thing? Or are we saying, is Jesus saying, is God working to say that this reversal creates a radically different perspective on who's counts, who's important, who's included? And if it just becomes a new way to exclude, is it really all that great? Is it really a gospel that we want to invest in? If it's a reversal that reveals God's priorities, then I think you can get to a point where you say, so we can see how God could include everyone in the kingdom. And it certainly isn't for us to say who's in and who's out. Universalism, universal salvation has always been an option in the Christian tradition. There's never been, it's not often the primary option that people choose, but there's plenty of biblical witness to make that an option in how you think about sort of the ultimate plan that God has. And when you trust in a God of love and grace for all, it's certainly an open option to say eventually God is bringing everyone into the fold. That's one reason why when you have All Saints Day and then All Souls Day, that becomes a much broader category of who are we thinking about and remembering and seeking God's blessing in their lives. That can be a much broader set of people. To me, the really interesting thing is the way whatever we view about that impacts how we live in the moment. Let's see, there's more here. The notion of reversal is a much less bitter, I guess, reading of that section than I've often heard. Yeah, I mean, that really is the gospel in Luke. It is a reversal. It starts from the very beginning, and you see it throughout. Just like in the last week's reading about Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus is wealthy and powerful, and he's oppressing people with his power, and he gives that up, and he gives it back. He lifts up the people who are poor and cheated, and he puts himself down below. The whole idea that he's up in the tree and then he comes down from the tree is Luke's visual of the gospel message. And the reversal is also it is an invitation for people who are blessed now to participate in God's reign by sharing their blessing, by offering it up. And therefore they're not excluded, they're invited to participate, but it's a different kind of participation from those who are at the bottom of the heap. Maybe vengeful is a better word than bitter. Yeah, it could be. Yeah. Who knows? All Saints Sunday is really one of the most beautiful, I think, meaningful, powerful Sundays that we observe, especially the way we've, kind of developed this ritual of remembrance, placing photos and mementos and writing names in the Book of the Dead and all this. It's very, very meaningful because we know the impact that especially our loved ones or the saints from this congregation or wherever we've grown up in faith, the impact they've had on our lives. And to remember and honor that is important and beautiful. It can be a time of grief and a time of joy all together. And then when we do that, I think it kind of leads us to think, okay, I'm also one of these people. I have some impact on other people, and I want to strive to do it like this person did. I'm inspired by them. And we want to celebrate that. We don't turn it into some, game of comparison or good enough or better or worse or whatever. It's about inspiration for me. What impact am I having on other people's lives? I guess in the best way of viewing the future, when I'm gone, I hope people would remember something about how I impacted their lives. That would be a great thing. So, there you go. I hope you can join us for Sunday worship at 10. If you can join us in person, I encourage you to bring something that would be meaningful to place in our display of remembrance area. And if you join us online, it might be meaningful to maybe have some of those photos of loved ones or saints who inspire you kind of around you during worship service. I think it'd be very meaningful, a meaningful way to participate through live stream this Sunday. Next week I am gone, so I will not have Tiny Desk sermon on Wednesday, but I'll be back the week after. And then, heads up, we start our extended Advent season a week from Sunday. So we've been doing this for years now. The Advent season in the earlier traditions of the church was a longer season, and it gives us more time to enjoy a different liturgy and a different mood in worship, both of hopeful waiting is how I usually think about Advent. So our liturgy is going to change. The colors will change. It's going to be a beautiful time for worship for the 6 Sundays after this coming Sunday. So I hope you can join us then. We have new paraments for Advent that will be used for the first time. So it's exciting to get ready to change our worship space. We also are in the middle of painting the sanctuary. Not me. We've hired a company to do it. We're hoping it's done by the end of the week, but we're not sure that it will be. But it will be done sometime next week, if not. So when you come Sunday, it may look half finished, or I don't know how it's going to be, but it's going to be beautiful when it's all done. All right. Thank you for joining me for Tiny Desk, and I'll see you again in 2 weeks. Peace.